All right, guys, welcome back. Happy to have you guys here. And guess what? Today's the big one. Today we get to talk about World War II. And I know a lot of you are really excited about this. I know most of your life you've been hearing about your parents talking about World War II, or you watching the History Channel with your grandpa and hearing all about Hitler's atrocities and stuff. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you guys the full rundown on what exactly happens during the war. But I do want to offer a quick caveat. All right. A lot of students are disappointed. They want to spend 2-3 weeks talking about World War II. And unfortunately, because of the nature of this year and because of the curriculum, I'm only going to be able to spend one day talking about the war. But I'm going to pack it with all the information you need. So everything on this PowerPoint needs to be in your notes. All right. It's fair game. College Board wants you to know it. And just like World War I, they want you to know about the new technology that changes, the conduct of the war, and obviously what causes World War II and the ultimate effect of it, okay? So guys, if World War II is something you're really interested in, let me go ahead and just plug taking a World War II class in college. All right, when I was over at Auburn teaching, they offered a whole semester full of classes on the U.S. Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Cold War, all that fun stuff. So again, unfortunately, I'm only going to be able to cover World War II quickly and briefly today, but there are plenty of opportunities for you to learn about this in the future, okay? So let's get started, guys. We're still in period 4, still in unit 7. All right, this is one of our last classes of unit 7. And today, guys, we are covering the whole World War II, the whole shebang. So to start with a meme, I love this meme. Oh my God, it's a Mean Girls meme, but also a Mean Guys meme. So World War II, guys. In our last class, we talked about the causes of the conflict. All right, I laid out all of the causes, the unsustainable peace based on the Treaty of Versailles. All right, I told you guys about appeasement. I told you about the rise of fascism, all right, in Italy and Germany, as well as in the Soviet Union. And I concluded by telling you guys that, oh crap, at the end of appeasement, the Soviet Union and Hitler, Germany had sort of teamed up. Well, that doesn't last very long. So the war is going to start in 1939 and it's going to go all the way till 1945. Now, I do want to say historians today are still not really sure whether to base the beginning of World War II on the Soviet Union and Germany invading Poland, or if we should base it on what happens over in Japan. So Japan, the imperial aggression and the invasion in Manchuria, okay? So just know that we're going to look at 1939 and we're going to say that that is the start of World War II. But you might hear someone else argue that Japan actually begins the world conflict. So what you need to understand, guys, is that from the moment that Hitler orders Blitzkrieg, all right? Hitler orders his Nazi soldiers to invade Poland from the west side, and the Soviet Union invades Poland from the east side. The war begins in Europe, okay? Britain and France are forced to respond. They had an alliance with Poland, and Poland was basically the line in the sand, okay? After the Munich Pact, when Hitler agreed never to invade anywhere else, and he lied, Britain and France were like, we got to do something about this, all right? So Britain and France will declare war on Germany as soon as Poland is invaded. The problem is, guys, is they can't expect the USSR to help them because turns out Germany and the USSR are in bed together, and that's not good. But the good news is that Hitler is a sneaky devil and he's going to break the non-aggression pact between the USSR and Germany. Later in 1940, he's actually going to invade the USSR. He has absolutely no respect for communism. He does not respect Stalin. And sure, they agreed to split up Poland, but you know, Hitler's pretty greedy. And he wants more than just half of Poland. He wants the whole Poland, and he wants a big chunk of the Soviet Union. And as you can see from this map, when Hitler finally does invade the Soviet Union, he takes a pretty big chunk of it. See all this orange right here? That's former Soviet Union land. And very quickly on in World War II, because of the disorganization of the Soviet Union, and because Stalin had already murdered all of his military, his high up military, the Soviet Union is actually going to get their butts kicked at first. Okay. Later on, the United States is going to join the side of the Allies, but not because they want to, and not because the United States cares about Britain and France. That actually doesn't really happen. It's only after Japan is going to attack the United States in Hawaii in a naval port called Pearl Harbor. So we have our allies, all right? They're a little similar to what our allies were in World War I, okay? France, Britain, the former Russia, and the United States. And on the other side, we have the triple axes. So remember, World War I, the German alliances was the Central Alliance, and in World War II, they're the triple axes. Who are the triple axes? Well, they are fascist countries. Germany and Italy are fascist. And while Japan technically isn't fascist, it has a pretty wild emperor who is pretty much controlled by the military, and the imperial aggression of the Japanese Empire is going to put it kind of right on track with Germany and Italy. Okay, so like World War I, guys, World War II is going to be a total war. All right, what is a total war? Well, like I said, it's when the totality of society mobilizes. Men, women, children, everyone. And everything that anyone does, economically, politically, socially, every component of society will be for the war effort. Okay. So when we're talking about World War II as a total war for all combatants, again, we're not just talking about men. We're not just talking about soldiers. We're also talking about women, children. And every side, whether they're part of the Allies or the Axis, are going to use art, media, and intensified nationalism. Very similar to World War I. And this stuff is going to be used to mobilize populations back at home, okay, so on the home front, and in the colonies, if these empires still have colonies abroad. So places like Great Britain, I mean, Great Britain still owns India, it still owns parts of Africa, all right? France as well still owns parts of Africa, okay? Japan will own huge chunks of Asia because of imperialism and colonialism. And so this artwork is going to be used to kind of inspire those populations, okay? Now, all of this includes women. So we said in World War I, guys, women actually have to step outside, especially women of the upper class. They actually have to step outside and go and work in those factories, right? And this total war is going to include women. And so we said after World War I, places like the United States and Great Britain are going to give women the right to vote. Well, this time women are going to have even more power after World War II because they stepped up. Now, like World War I, guys, you're going to see the use of propaganda. Okay, so I've given you a few examples of propaganda here. All of them are very, I don't know, patriotic and kind of cringy a little bit. So this is that sort of perfect German student, obviously a Nazi. We have a Russian woman who's obviously putting together some weapons. And we have this American propaganda, all right? Uncle Sam leading the troops against probably the Germans or the Japanese. Cringy. Yes, very. So guys, some other things you need to understand about World War II. Governments are going to be using, obviously governments are going to be using nationalism. All right, Nazi Germany is going to use people's love for their country, their German ethnicity, their whiteness, all right, their so-called Aryanness to kind of inspire people. But they're also going to be using ideologies, especially economic ideologies, all right? So we said, if you're a fascist, you hate communism. And if you're a communist, you hate fascism. So these governments are going to be using the fear of fascism and the fear of communism to mobilize all their resources. So remember, Hitler is going to be telling the German people, the worst thing in the entire world is communism in the USSR. Similarly, Joseph Stalin's going to be talking about what a nutbag fascism is over in Germany, okay? But the middle ground here is that both sides hate democracy. So now, Last class, we also talked about totalitarians. So Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, they might not have much in common ideologically, but they are totalitarian leaders. All right, they own or they rule totally over society. And part of being a totalitarian state means that basic freedoms are repressed. So what you're going to start to see is the so-called freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to congregate, the freedom of school, all that stuff's going to get repressed. Okay. You don't get to have an opinion in Nazi Germany, especially if that opinion is counter to the Nazi party. Okay. It's the same in Italy. If you don't agree with Benito Mussolini, you better not speak out or your head is going to be on an axe. Okay. Japan is the same way. All right. The Japanese emperor does not tolerate freedom of speech. It's this basic freedom that we take advantage of in 2021 in the United States ain't going to happen in these totalitarian states. Remember, these states have to have total control of the entire population in order to be successful, in order to mobilize everyone. You need to dominate the entire daily life of a citizen. All right, you see in Nazi Germany, they have, as soon as youth go to school, they're required to participate in Hitler Youth. All right, so they're indoctrinated to be fascist from a much younger age. They continue through high school and they have to participate in Hitler camps. After they go to college, they're required to be part of the Nazi party. All right, these totalitarian states dominate everything. All right. And that is that is a huge problem, especially when your country says, all right, we're going to war against these people, because your life is now controlled by this totalitarian state. So I said, guys, there's some propaganda. College Board wants you to know World War I, World War II, they're all about that propaganda. So I wanted to show you some examples. During World War II, Joseph Stalin, all right, a very militaristic Soviet propaganda piece. We also have propaganda pieces with women. And I don't speak Russian, but I assume that this one is a little bit like the loose lips sink ships. So don't talk. All right, German propaganda. They always, whenever they're showing a German boy or a German girl, they're always this perfect Aryan race, this white kid with blonde hair and blue eyes, always this happy Nazi. And they also have a lot of propaganda that kind of propagates that big lie, the idea that the Jews are evil and that the Jews have sold out the Germans. So this one obviously shows you this very stereotypical version of a Jewish, I imagine a Jewish employer wearing that the Jewish tag. Now, conducting the war, guys. So this is kind of the big theme that College Board wants you to know, how the war changes between World War I and World War II. So we said that in World War I was an industrialized war. It was the first industrialized war. All right, we said that World War I started on horseback and finished with airplanes. So World War II is also an industrialized war. And so when we're talking about industrialized war, we're talking about mass casualties. Okay, when you have a machine gun against soldiers, you're going to have some mass casualties. Now, the weaponry does change. Most of it, between World War I and World War II, most of it is sort of an upgrade, okay? You see more powerful bombs. You see airplanes going from that early biplane iteration to things like this, all right, that can carry heavier bombs and fly farther places. All right, those World War I tanks that I told you guys were crap, were jokes, that barely got through no man's land. Well, World War II tanks are a lot better, especially the Nazi tanks. Very, very good tanks. All right, they could go very far distances, and they had heavy artillery on them. So these big guns right here, okay? You also have new types of bombs. I think most of you are probably familiar with World War II being the first time that the atom bomb is used, as seen in this picture, okay? The atom bomb will be used against Japan. But there are other different kinds of technologies and tactics that also include bombing that we need to talk about today. Okay, the big one being firebombing. All right. Now, I need you guys to understand that both sides see World War II as a fight for survival. So if you are a Nazi citizen, you think if we don't win this war, Germany is toast. We are done. And if you are an American citizen or a British citizen, You see this war as, if we don't win this war, we are toast. And when you have that level of fear for survival, you're going to fight a lot harder. And so you're going to see much higher casualty rates in World War II, okay? Way worse than World War I. And it's not just going to be military, all right, when soldiers fight against other soldiers. In World War II, it's going to be much deadlier because soldiers are going to go after innocent civilians, okay? You're going to start seeing much higher casualties because citizens are fair game. Why are citizens fair game? Total war, guys. When the totality of your society is working towards the war effort, then they are fair game, okay? All those women who took jobs in bomb factories, they are now targets, all right? All those children who are raising money to send to the front, to the soldiers at the front, they are now targets. Now let's talk about some of this new technology that's going to really cause huge casualties. The first one, guys, you've probably heard of Blitzkrieg. It is a German it's a German word for lightning war, okay? So Blitzkrieg is pretty famous. And you guys might remember that in World War I, things got into a stalemate, all right? Both sides dug in and stuck it out in trenches for 4 years, okay? Without much movement. No one was really moving in those trenches. They dug in, and sure, you could kind of cross the no man's land and maybe take one trench, but you weren't going to go much further than that. Well, the Nazis realized that the only way for them to truly be successful was if World War II was a war in which nobody got that bogged down. Once you got into a trench, it was going to be deadly and ugly and awful, okay? So instead, you get Blitzkrieg, and Blitzkrieg is fast-paced movement. So the Germans are going to use a tactic where they're going to use their really, really updated and advanced fast-moving tanks to overpower places quickly. So you see Blitzkrieg in Poland. Basically, I think Poland fell within 2 weeks. The Germans just steamrolled their way all the way to the center of Poland, the capital of Warsaw. It was quick, it was fast, and it was so fast moving that nobody even knew what was going on. All of a sudden, Germany just steamrolled your entire place. Now, you guys might have heard of the fun fact about Blitzkrieg. One of the reasons it was successful is because the German soldiers really didn't sleep. How? Well, Hitler gave German soldiers speed or amphetamines, all right, so hardcore drugs, in order to make Blitzkrieg successful. So Blitzkrieg is going to be this new and this thing that we haven't seen yet. Again, this is the opposite of World War I, where people are digging in and just sticking it out. No, Blitzkrieg is boom, 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 boom. We've conquered your country, and end game. And this is going to lead to a lot of early successes in the war. So that is our first new technology. What is our second one? Firebombing. Now, I know most of you guys think of the big Hiroshima and Nagasaki when the United States dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, right? Killing hundreds, well, not hundreds, thousands and thousands of people, okay? But there was actually an even more deadly type of bombing, and that was called firebombing, okay? Now, a lot of students have asked me in the past, why did the United States A-bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I mean, those are kind of insignificant. Why didn't they go after Tokyo? And the answer is that Tokyo had already been destroyed in firebombing. So basically what firebombing is it's this new American bombing tactic. And so essentially what happens is a plane flies over and drops a bomb. And not only does the bomb explode, but it kind of throws out this incendiary material. So it's stuff that really catches fire very quickly. So the whole area is kind of blanketed with this material that just lights like quick. And then the bomb goes off and everything around it just lights into this huge fireball. All right. And it's so hot and it's so quick moving that the fireball just kind of takes over a whole city. So in 1945, all right, I think it's in April 1945, could be wrong on that, the United States firebombs Tokyo. Tokyo is a city made entirely of wood. Yeah, it doesn't end well for the Japanese. All right, Tokyo is completely annihilated. And I believe this right here is a picture of what Tokyo looks like from the air during the firebomb. All right, it's just completely on fire. More people will die in the Tokyo firebomb than they died at Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So firebombing is extremely effective, all right? But it's also controversial because in order for it to be successful, you also have to bomb schools, hospitals, places where civilians work, right? But remember, this is a total war now, and now these guys are these innocent civilians are now fair game. Another very famous firebombing incident, right? We have Tokyo, and here we have Dresden. Right? Dresden occurs in Germany. Dresden is completely annihilated. Okay, and even to this day, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not Dresden should have been firebombed. All right, lots and lots of civilians were killed. All right, thousands of civilians were killed in this. School children, hospitals, but it had to be done. All right, it had to be done because you have to kind of put a pin to the heart for the Axis powers. All right, it's the only way that we're going to win this war. So guys, World War II, as you can probably tell, is pretty dang awful. And let me give you a little background about what's going to happen. So we've already talked about how Poland split in half between Germany and USSR. Not too long after that, the Germans renege on their deal and say, you know what? We don't like the communists, and the Germans invade the Soviet Union, okay? And that's a terrible mistake. And although they have a lot of successes, as you can see, the Nazi Germany penetrates pretty far into the Soviet Union. Russia has a great ally, and the ally's name is winter. And the Nazi soldiers don't do very well in winter, okay? And so in 1941, after some really horrific battles, what you're going to see is the Soviet Union is able to kind of start pushing back on Nazi Germany. All right, so this military administration is kind of slowly pushed back, and eventually the Soviet Union will start to push the Germans back. Okay. Germany also invades France very quickly using these Blitzkrieg tactics. Now, I know a lot of you like to joke that the French surrender a lot, and you're probably right, but I do want you to remember how awful the death toll was for the French in World War I. They surrendered here in World War II so quickly so that they didn't have to undergo the atrocities of World War I. The only European power, okay, that really fights back against the Germans and has some good success is the United Kingdom or Great Britain, okay? Our sort of villains of period 3 are now our heroes because they actually have some success here. So guys, as I've just demonstrated to you, the war itself is initially an Axis success. All right, the Germans penetrate pretty far into the Soviet Union. They take France. They take a lot of other places within Europe. All right, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark. Okay. The turning point, guys, is going to be December 1941. Now, you guys all know what happens in December 7th, 1941. All right, you guys are Americans. You've grown up hearing this story. The Americans were peaceful. They were isolated. After World War I, we didn't sign the Treaty of Versailles. We didn't join the League of Nations. We wanted to be isolated. We wanted nothing to do with the rest of the world. But the rest of the world wasn't going to leave us alone. So in 1941, due to a confluence of reasons, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and sunk several American naval vessels. Okay. Fortunately, they didn't sink any of the really important aircraft carriers. But what this does is it forces the United States to enter the war. And so the United States is going to enter the war on the side of the Allies. All right. Also in 1941, good old winter stops Germany. Okay. That is when the Soviets are going to stop the German offensive into the Soviet Union and start to push them back. So 1941 was a pretty dark year, but on the other hand, in retrospect, it's the year that everything starts to change. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry about that, guys. I just had to answer a phone call. let's see, I think I'm done with this page. Yeah, turning point of the war was December 1941. Soviets stopped the German offensive, all right? But we still have 1942, 1943, 1944, and 1945. So long way of war to go. But because this is College Board boiling down only just the material you need to know, what you do need to know is that using superior resources and much larger armies, the Allies are going to push the Germans back. So Britain is going to push the Germans out of France slowly. And then obviously you guys know about D-Day, all right, Deembarkation Day, June 6, 1944, the United States, Great Britain, Canada, several allied nations arrive in France on the beaches and slowly push the Germans out of France, pushing them all the way across Belgium, the Netherlands, and back to Germany. Okay. In April of 1945, it is all over. Okay. The city of Berlin, the Soviets are on the doorstep. Okay. The Soviets have come from the east, the Allies have come from the west. Okay. Hitler tells the German people, fight every last one of you, man, women, and children. And then he goes into his bunker and commits suicide. Wimp. But what you need to know, and what you need to know for Unit 8 and the remainder of Period 4 is this. The United States is going to liberate Western Europe, and the Soviet Union will liberate Eastern Europe. And at the end of the war, whoever was occupying your state, whether it was the democratic United States or the communist Soviet Union, was how your ideological government was going to fall during the Cold War. Make sure you understand that. We will go over this again, okay? This is a great picture, guys. This is a Soviet soldier hoisting the Soviet Union flag over Berlin after Berlin had been liberated. Okay. So in 1945, this is what the map looks like, guys. The Soviet Union has liberated Eastern Europe. The United States liberated Western Europe. And what that means is that these countries are going to be democratic. These countries are going to be communist. Okay. Now, the war in the Pacific. So this is the one that you guys probably know. Well, I don't know, maybe you know a lot about it. The big one, the United States versus Japan, okay? So guys, after the shock of Pearl Harbor, after 1941, when the United States gets real shocked by the Japanese showing up in Pearl Harbor and bombing the crap out of our boats, the United States is going to quickly regroup. Okay, there's a great quote. One of the Japanese leaders after Pearl Harbor, it wasn't quite the success he imagined. And he told his troops, I fear we have just awoken a sleeping giant. And he had. Once the United States was forced into this war, in many ways it was over. All right, the United States has lots of resources, lots of money, all right? Superior resources, oil, all right? Powerful navies, and a much larger population. And using these resources, all right, the United States will slowly push Japan back. So at this point, guys, Japan, Imperial Japan has a huge chunk of the Pacific, all right? On top of that, guys, firebombing. The United States is going to firebomb the crap out of Japan, all right? Going to destroy Tokyo. It's going to destroy other places. And it will devastate Japanese industries. So Japan's not even going to be able to carry on the war. They're not going to be able to, make ammunition to keep the fight going. And so after Germany surrenders in April 1945, the United States, whatever troops the US has in Europe, can now be shifted out of Europe into the war in the Pacific. So make sure you understand the war in Europe is going to end in April 1945. The war in the Pacific will end in August 1945 after the A-bombs are dropped. Okay. Now, after Germany surrenders, the United States is making this plan for this massive invasion of Japan. The problem is, guys, everyone knows the war is over for the Japanese except for the Japanese. All right. The Japanese are not big on that whole surrender concept. So the United States realizes look, we could invade Japan and lose millions of our own boys and kill lots of Japanese civilians, or drop these horrific nuclear weapons that we don't really understand or know much about. What are we gonna do? So here is what happens, guys. As the United States is planning this invasion, FDR dies. All right, it's a very sad thing. FDR was a great president. He is going to die and be replaced by a former hat maker named Harry Truman. All right, also an awesome US president. You guys will love this guy in a push. During the entirety of the war, the United States was funding a nuclear project in several places in the United States. Okay, in Tennessee, at Oak Ridge, at Los Alamos in New Mexico, something called the Manhattan Project. So basically a bunch of brilliant scientists, some of them former Nazis, were getting together and figuring out how to use nuclear fission, which is essentially the breaking of an atom, to make a bad ASS bomb, okay? And that is what they do. They figure out how to make an atomic war or an atomic weapon. So they test the first atomic bomb in the summer of 1945. And once they realize the capabilities of this bomb, they're like, oh, we got this. This war is over with. And on August 6th, 1945, the world changes. The United States will drop an atomic bomb, right? The bomb's nickname is the Little Boy, on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, instantly killing over 60,000 Japanese people, okay? And hundreds of thousands of more due to the effects of radiation in the coming days. When Japan does not instantly surrender, 2 days later, the United States will drop another bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, on the city of Nagasaki, okay? At this point, the Japanese emperor sees the atrocities of Hiroshima and the horror of Nagasaki and promptly surrenders to the United States in Tokyo Harbor. And the war is over. So guys, the height of Japanese expansion, I probably should have shown you this a little earlier. Okay, at this point, this is all that Japan owns, Pearl Harbor. And after Pearl Harbor is hit, we're gonna start pushing the Japanese back into Japan. Now, once the atomic bomb goes off over Hiroshima, this is what Hiroshima looks like. The only reason that this building is actually still standing, and it is still standing, visited it last summer, is because the bomb dropped directly overhead, and so it kind of prevented the whole the building from collapsing. But Hiroshima was an important industrial center, which is why it was targeted. So at the end of the war, guys, 80 million people are dead. Now, think about this. World War I was a horror, okay? And only 20 million people died. World War II is way worse. 80 million people of these are dead, and only a third of them are soldiers, all right? So all of those dead American soldiers, German soldiers, Soviet soldiers, that's a lot of people that are dead fighting for their country, and yet civilians pay a worse price. All right, civilians are going to die in a lot of different ways. Targeted attacks, right, because of total war. Genocides, all right, the Holocaust. But there's also other genocides. The Japanese commit mass atrocities against the Chinese people and the Korean people. All right, we'll talk about that in just a second. Famine, all right, when people are too busy trying to stay alive and not get murdered by soldiers, all right, no one's really growing food. Disease, okay? Wartime atrocities, y'all. 20 million Chinese people are going to be killed by Japanese soldiers. Now, I don't know the estimate for Koreans, but a huge amount will also be killed in Korea as well. 4 million Indonesians are also going to die because of the Japanese. Now, the Japanese are genociders. Absolutely. They commit a genocide against these people, okay? The atrocities committed in China are often called the rape of Nanking. So if that name doesn't tell you alone about all the awful things that happened, well, hopefully it does. And the big one, guys, the one that you all know about is the Holocaust. In a normal year, guys, we would have gone to the Holocaust Museum in Atlanta as sophomores for our field trip, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that this year, all right? COVID. But what you need to know about the Holocaust is that the Nazis systematically murdered between 6 to 9 million of European Jews in concentration camps or in extermination camps. I wanted you guys to take a look at this death chart. As you can see, because of World War II, the Soviet Union is going to pay the vast majority of the price. All right, lots of civilians, lots of military deaths. China also, because of that genocide committed by the Japanese. All right, Poland, as you can see, after the Blitzkrieg between Germany and the Soviet Union. All right, the United States doesn't really pay that high of a price, but that's still a really large percentage. All right, it's still a lot of deaths. All right. Germany also pays a high price, military deaths and civilian deaths. So overall, guys, the biggest amount of people that died are going to be part of the Allies. All right, civilians, Soviet civilians, Polish civilians. And finally, what you need to know about the Holocaust according to College Board. Unfortunately, we cannot spend as much time as I would like to spend on the Holocaust, but I know that you have all probably talked about it in other classes before. Between 1941 and 1945, the Nazis embraced a plan called the Final Solution. All right, the Final Solution was the decision to kill any one of European Jews they could find. This was actually a mistake on the Germans' part. They should have used their resources to be fighting the Allies, but instead they were more interested in systematically murdering 2/3 of the European Jewish population. So they used a lot of resources in this process. Murdering innocent Jewish, gypsies, people of the LGBT community, and these murders are going to be carried out in horrific fashion. All right, mass shootings, children mass shot, all right, babies thrown into ovens, extermination, being forced to work to death, and gas chambers. All right, the big one that you need to know about is this one down here. Auschwitz is an extermination camp. All right, over, I think, 2 to 3 million Jews are estimated to have been killed at Auschwitz in the gas chambers. Okay. Why? Because of Hitler's big lie. Because Hitler had convinced the German people that the Jews were to blame for Germany's loss in World War I. Look at the face of these kids, guys. Are they to blame? No. It is a lie, and it is a lie that is told when a totalitarian leader represses basic freedom and lies to his citizens. All right? 2/3 of the Jewish population are killed because of this lie. And you need to never forget about this genocide or any genocide we talk about in AP World or in any time that you learn about these things. Nobody should ever forget what happens. All right, guys, that was a long lesson, I know, and this is the sort of Reader's Digest version of World War I, or World War II, excuse me, but we covered it, all right? You needed to know about the conduct of the war. You needed to know about firebombing. You needed to know about the A-bombs. All right, Blitzkrieg. You need to know about the causes of World War II and the effects, which we will talk about in our next class. So guys, if you're tuning in because you've missed class, please send me an email and I will get you the work that you've missed. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys later.